So, last year I said this, because while Borderlands 3 is my favorite game of the year, and I'm going to have a lot of fun producing content about it for a while, and I absolutely did not keep that promise, because while Borderlands 3 is probably the best game of last year by a long shot, it doesn't really offer much interesting things to discuss. The story is, at best, a fun fan fiction before the actual plot of a new Borderlands game, and at worst actually damages the world, its characters, and lore majorly, creating a game in which you wish everybody would just shut up and let you shoot things. I have no complaints about the gameplay in this video, by the way. No big ones, at least. The devs knew all fans wanted was more Borderlands content, so all they had to do was a few small changes here and there to breathe in new and addicting fun into the series. The weapon manufacturers are all powerful and varied in their own way, and the classes in this game are by far the best, with the incredible amount of variety they offer. This is the first game in which I personally leveled all 4 characters to max level at launch. I no joke probably clocked in around 200 hours in the base game of Borderlands 3. Then came its first DLC, and it was fun. I enjoyed the concepts behind the new areas, and while throwbacks to Borderlands 2 are overused in general, to me, they were very welcome here. Then came the next one, and I could only really care about the main campaign, which again showed off some impressive new areas, but felt sort of cheapened by the fact that nobody actually showed up to what was probably the biggest, most important wedding we actually get to see in the main Borderlands canon. I get what they were going for, but just like the main campaign of Borderlands 3, there was this weird feeling I just couldn't shake off. It's like they don't want to put their own beloved characters in their game for some reason. It's really hard to put your finger on. You might call this an unwarranted expectation, but if we take Borderlands 2 as a blueprint for how to gain huge success in the franchise, which we should, by the way, it was and still is by far the most successful and popular piece of Borderlands media, and has been for more than 8 years. We can see that a large reason for its success was the world building and fun characters. They had a great idea with reintroducing the playable characters from Borderlands 1 as NPCs that are relevant allies in the story, supporting you with their unique abilities and humor. Everything pointed to Borderlands 3 doing the same, and it just didn't. Most of the game is just listening to endless monologues by Lilith and Tannis, which are voice acted by the same lady, by the way. Which, honestly, the idea that I've been listening to the endless, and I do mean endless, rambles of just one lady for over 200 hours makes me go slightly insane. People were clearly looking at the DLC campaigns for BL3 to have a reason to care again, which they just couldn't provide. So when I heard that the third DLC would just not include any already known characters at all, I thought it'd be best for me to just skip it and play it once the game gets those 3 new skill trees. It all truly was pointing towards the last DLC to really wow us. For context, the most loved Borderlands DLC of all time was no doubt Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep. This was the last large campaign sold for Borderlands 2, and came out to unparalleled critical acclaim. It told an emotional and mature tale about grief and escapism, as well as offering a varied and magical environment with fun quests and creative new gear. It truly was a high point for Borderlands, and yet again reinforced the feeling of family in its playable characters, again creating expectations for this to be continued in the sequel. In Borderlands 3, then it all again pointed to the 4th DLC to bring us a real highlight. Just like the aforementioned one, it was set to bring us the emotional tale of a broken mind coming to terms with the death of a loved one, while we explored a twisted and colorful world instead of one of Borderlands' most popular characters. Krieg was one of the bonus characters in Borderlands 2, and got famous because of his funny lines and tragic backstory. He is essentially all of what the Borderlands franchise is known for, put into one hilarious and fun to play character. And because he was basically a slightly less out of control version of the Psychos, the serious mascot, he basically was Borderlands. Safe to say, I was definitely feeling the hype. The DLC promised a fantastical journey through Krieg's mind, initiated by our favorite never shutting the fuck up scientist Tannis, in order to understand what makes Psychos crazy in the first place, and if it's possible, cure them. The trailers had many implications, the biggest one of them insinuating they might correct the worst thing the Borderlands 3 story did, Maya's anticlimactic death. Now, before we get into this, about Krieg's backstory. Basically, what we know from Borderlands 2 is that Krieg was once a family man who got captured and tested on by Hyperion, driving him crazy and causing his personality to split into a calm and rational one and a dominant, completely out of control murderous one. The rational part of Krieg falls in love with Maya after fighting off a psycho ambush, who knows about his feelings for her but doesn't reciprocate because she is asexual, but likes him a lot nonetheless. Maya introduces Krieg to the other Borderlands 2 Vault Hunters, and they become one big family. Sane Krieg meanwhile tries to fight over dominance with his insane counterpart, trying to establish ways in which he may communicate better with the world outside of his mind, a task extremely exhausting for Sane Krieg, who promises to take control over their shared body and kill himself if the violent personality ever allows innocence to die. Maya is heavily implied to be included in this threat. The two continue to bond, and Krieg seemingly gets better until Maya needs to leave to protect the planet Athenas. Sorry for the history lesson, but best not to miss out on the details, eh? Well, the DLC begins with us entering Krieg's mind on behalf of Tannis. Krieg's mind, which is conveniently a planet we can just fly to instead of having Krieg join us on Sanctuary and sit in Tannis' lab, which would make a lot more sense, but alright. There we are introduced to both the sane and insane Krieg, who will guide us through their mindscape, along with Tannis constantly talking to us in a condescending tone. By the way, I don't actually have that much of a problem with Tannis. I like the type of dry humor they write her with, but the problem is she just doesn't work as a main character. She's good as an unemotional, confusing foil to other main characters, but can barely stand on her own legs as a quest giver. And while I find many of her bizarre monologues quite chuckle-worthy, they just lose all flavor and uniqueness when the same joke of Tannis doesn't understand human emotion gets repeated and especially since this particular story is basically just about emotion. First, we jump into Krieg's memory of fighting the Borderlands 3 bad guys with the Borderlands 1 Vault Hunters, which, okay, where are Maya, X, and Salvador, Gage, and Zero during this? Tannis also briefly mentions that she doesn't know the limits of the tech we are using to explore his mind yet, and we very well may gain unexpected results, implying we might be able to resurrect Maya out of Krieg's memory, which had me incredibly giddy to see where they'd go next. The first area is fun, with some nice boss fights, with Krieg's friends, which his mind has twisted into becoming his enemies. Unfortunately, this plotline of Krieg secretly thinking people hate him is never mentioned or picked up again. At the end, we unlock a memory in which the others are just nice to him and he apparently can't take that, and that's why he ends up leaving? Next, we visit Krieg's memory of Maya, who is kidnapped by a giant anthropomorphic train. The areas we go through here are a real highlight, with the train constantly teleporting, trying to run us over. Here we also learn that Krieg knew about Maya's death for a while now, and treasures his last memories of her deeply because of this. Unfortunately, his mind is in shambles, and it's uncertain as to which memories will survive his current state. It is also said that Maya might have stored some of her energy in her spellbook, which Ava is currently in possession of in the story. We save Maya and she joins us in the DLC's hub area. Oh, and all this talk about Maya not being completely gone is never mentioned again. Haha, fun! Next is Krieg's memory of how his personality split in the first place. We learn nothing new here. It went just about as you'd expect. I've a question though. If this DLC was about the one common factor that apparently made all psychos in Borderlands go crazy, this part is highly contradictory, as Krieg's origins are wholly his own, and it's not like the countless psycho enemies in the Borderlands have had the exact same experience as him. So we just kill the doctor that experimented on him and see a short cutscene in which he remembers a fragment of his wife and daughter, but realizes that that memory has been eradicated from his mind. Well, anyway, after unlocking the secret vault in Krieg's mind by restoring his memory, we fight the guardian of that vault, which is a giant, unnecessarily bullet spongy and boring Viking boss, and get timed access to the Great Vault. After that, we get one more cutscene and the story is over. Yeah, that's it. Really. There's nothing else to this DLC than just a bunch of extremely short side quests, which usually just involve talking to other fragments of Krieg's mind. So wait, Chris, how did the story end? Do we finally learn what actually turns Blackos insane? What about the Great Valhalla and Maya? What? Oh, yeah, right. Well, turns out the insane Krieg has just been a protection mechanism for the sane one this whole time, violently trying to shut everyone but Maya out. And the Great Vault Guardian was just blocking a path to a complete reboot and restart to Krieg's mental state. After learning this, sane Krieg, who previously hoped to escape his body and be implanted into a new one, chooses to stay with his insane counterpart, as they rebuild their minds together with their memories of Maya. Okay, so what actually happened in this DLC? No, seriously, I'm asking. Because to me, this just seems completely devoid of plot. It basically just tells us what we already know about Krieg in more detail, but doesn't add anything interesting at that, and then just tells us that he decides to not do anything anyway. The same personality doesn't gain any more control over his body. There's no development in either of the two Kriegs, and Maya's death, which everybody thought this DLC would be about, is just hand-waved as a little bit of a bummer. This perfectly reflects the problem Borderlands 3 has as a whole. It just absolutely can't catch the magic or flair of the previous games. And furthermore, we are just not ever given a reason to care. Nothing in the characters or world changes, and therefore it feels like we're just wandering around aimlessly, listening to people ramble about nothing under the flimsy guise of comedy. It seems what's missing in BL3 isn't content, but substance. There's lots to do, but none of it matters. There's no actual resonance to be found. Borderlands 3 has no depth, but endless amounts of repeated fun to be had. Remember that catchphrase that made Krieg famous?
I'm the conductor of the poop train!
No, not that one.
I have the shiniest meat bicycle!
Yeah, that's the one. See, Borderlands 3 is no meat, all bicycle.